My name is Andrew Meinel. I'm not on staff here, but I have attended here for 37 years. So it's been my church home for 37 years. I want to tell you a bit more about myself in just a minute. But we're in our series, Jesus is Lord. And to set the scenes, I want to read Mark chapter 4. So if you want to look it up in your own Bible, Mark chapter 4, verse 35. Or you can obviously watch on the screen. That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And he got up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Even with an attitude of prayer now, as I look at you, you look at each other, we just want to ask God to speak to us today. See what he has to say to us with what's been prepared. To the extent there's something in here that's not of God, may he give you the wisdom to know that as well. But we want the Spirit of God to speak to us today. So if you're a jigsaw puzzle person, or even if you're not, you know about jigsaw puzzles, you kind of know that the middle bit, all the detail in the middle, is a lot easier when you get the boundary done. One thing I've learned over the last 8 years through my journey is that it's really helped me to get a really solid and deep understanding of the big picture of God's story. Really deep. I've really enjoyed studying and get it deep. So I'm going to sort of set at the start here a bit more of a big picture setting of this scene of Jesus is Lord. To set the scene, the slide coming up with a map of, is that coming up there? The map of Israel and Europe. And you can see there that there's a couple other people who really hold the title Lord. So when Jesus comes in, when he's baptized by John, when he's about to go out and do ministry and start to do things, it's going to start to shout to people, "Hey, I am Lord." There's a couple of other contenders. One's Herod, King Herod Antipas. He was called King of the Jews, but he really only ruled over a part of Israel. His dad was Herod the Great, and he was appointed by Rome. So really, his rule is a bit impotent, really. He's under the thumb of Rome. So then we go look at Tiberius Caesar Augustus. He's the Roman emperor when Jesus starts to do these things. And he is called Lord, a Kyrios. And so Jesus, but if you have a look at those reddish, dark orange areas, well, firstly, look at the white area. That's Rome, Italy. That's their native title land. But then the Roman Empire is going to start to branch out from there, and they're going to start to invade and take over other areas. And if you heard Matt Gray's message from a few weeks ago, one of the things he said is that they would send a herald out. They'd send them into, let's say they've just taken over Spain. They'd send a herald there, say, "Good news, Caesar is Lord." Big difference is, of course, they could do nothing about it. They didn't choose him. He imposed themselves onto him. At Rome's height, it was about 20, they ruled over about 20% of the population. So you've got little old Israel, King Herod, then you've got Rome, 20%. But there's another contender as well. When Jesus is baptized, it says the Spirit of God drove him into the wilderness. And then in Luke 4, 5 and 8, well, the devil tempts him, and a couple of times he says to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, do this." But then he takes him to a high place, and he shows Jesus in an instant all the kingdoms of the world, and he said to him, "I, the devil, will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will all be yours." And when the devil had finished all his tempting, he left him until an opportune time. Big picture, who's Lord at the moment? Who's ruler? Satan's never called Lord, he's a prince, but he has control. And while we don't fully understand this, he has control over the whole world. Interesting that when Satan said these things, it's very true, by the way, that Jesus did come to reclaim the nations. He's going to do that. But here's what Jesus doesn't do in that moment. Jesus doesn't quote Exodus 19:5. He doesn't say, Satan, all the earth is mine. He doesn't say, Deuteronomy 10:14, to the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. That would answer the question, wouldn't it, about whose earth this is? He doesn't quote Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. And I think why Jesus doesn't quote them is because Jesus knows what's actually at stake. It is the souls, hearts and minds of the people in all of the world, not just the 20% that Rome controls. In all of the world, this is why Jesus has come. Big picture thinking. He does say, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. This is not about geography, this lordship language. It's not about that, it's about the people who dwell there. And when the devil says to him, I'll give it to you, he actually is really offering him a shortcut to what Jesus wants. Jesus has come to reclaim the nations, but he's offering him a shortcut. And later in the story, Rome will execute Jesus. King Herod will approve of this. So will the religious rulers. And the devil will get his other opportunity. But that's not the end of the story, as we know. So immediately after Jesus is baptized by John and he's tempted in the desert, the very first thing he does, he goes to a synagogue in Capernaum. And in this synagogue, he's confronted by someone possessed by an evil spirit. So to put it in our context, it's 10 a.m., Sunday morning, Edwardstown Baptist Church. Jesus turns up, he's confronted by this evil spirit. And before Jesus does any miracles at this stage, just have a listen and a read of the response of this evil spirit. The evil spirit says, have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Later on, Jesus is going to be in a certain region and a spirit comes to him and says, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Do not torment me. Just want to make the point, Jesus is about to do miracles to demonstrate who he is. Spiritual forces of evil already know who he is, and they're terrified. Also note what Jesus does not do here. Have you come to torment me? He does not torment them. At this point in history, that is not what he's going to do. It's not what he is about. This point in history, he is about freeing people from captivity. Spiritual forces of evil will get their day and they will be destroyed completely. It's not now. From there, Jesus goes out to Peter's mother-in-law's place. She's got a high fever and Jesus heals her. These two acts tell us that great crowds then started to come. Jesus is now attracting a crowd because of these wonderful signs that he is doing. And Jesus goes on to heal many. He cures and heals leprosy. He miraculously feeds 4,000. He miraculously feeds 5,000. There's someone who's crippled walks, blind people see, deaf people hear. He does all of these things. And with that power and demonstration and authority, what I want to do now, what I've gone through is every one of those miracles, I've pulled the miracle out and I've left just the response to the miracle. Okay? We're going to rush through these. They're all going to be on the screen. Largely in order. And they were all amazed. They questioned among themselves, what is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits and they obey him. And the whole city was gathered at his door. There's the crowds. And they were afraid and glorified God, saying, we never saw anything like this. They were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him, his own disciples. And they were afraid. There were some non-Jewish crowds. They began to beg Jesus, depart from their region, the non-Jewish crowds. Everyone marveled, non-Jewish crowds. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. The family of a girl raised to life. And many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands?" That was Jesus. That was people in Jesus' hometown. And they took offense at him, people in Jesus' hometown. King Herod heard of it, the aforementioned king, for Jesus had become known. Some said, "John the Baptist has been raised from the dead." Others said, "He is Elijah," and others said, "He is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old." But when King Herod heard of it, he said, "John, whom I have beheaded, has been raised." For all who saw him, insert miracle, were terrified, his disciples. And they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand his disciples. They were astonished beyond measure. The Pharisees came, began to argue with him. This is a good one. He is out of his mind, his own family. Jumping into Matthew, this is important, not in Mark's gospel, but when the Pharisees heard this, they said, "It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons." So great demonstrations of power of authority, the sort of miracles we love to see. If God did that, I would believe. Here's the initial responses to it. Impressed, amazed, astonished, afraid, terrified. Most want to be near him. Some want him to go away. Some are angry. Some are happy. Everyone's a bit confused, except the spiritual powers of evil. They know who he is. Even the disciples who have witnessed most, if not all, of these miracles at this point in time don't yet get who this is. So I've done the best I can to sort of summarize all of these responses, and I'm saying these are the curious confused, the angry offended, the committed questioners. Want to see how that lands? The story rolls on, and one day Jesus is walking with his disciples, and in Mark 8:27 to 29, we read this: Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" And they say, well, it's a three-way tie at the moment, Jesus. Some are saying John the Baptist. Where did that story start? We read it earlier. Either Herod himself started that story because he was afraid because he had beheaded John the Baptist, he's raised to life. Somewhere that story started. So there's logic to that. Others say Elijah, still others say the prophets. Jesus is doing what prophets in the past have done. Prophets in the past have done miracles. But to date, these miracles might only prove he is a prophet. Elijah himself, why do they say Elijah? He has been, for the Jewish people who knew their scriptures, they know that Elijah was promised to return before the Messiah would come. So they're looking for Elijah. That's a great response. And by the way, Elijah himself performed miracles. Two of them, he multiplied food, jar of oil that did not run out. I think it was a flour that did not run out. And Elijah also raised someone from the dead. So this is logical. This could be Elijah, right? And then Jesus turns to his disciples. "What about you? Who do you say I am?" And Peter answers, "You are the Messiah." This is a nice spot to finish a message, a lovely story that ends with confusion, beginning, confusion, resolution. Jesus, you are the Messiah. You're the one we've been waiting for. This is what we've been looking for. We've been looking for you to come, to save us, and to restore your kingdom. But there's more to the story. It goes on that something happens at some time during Jesus' ministry. And again, let's just remember, at this point, the crowds are following him. They're pushing in on him to the extent that at one point Jesus has to get on a boat because the crowds are pushing right up against the shore. He's popular. He's being followed. And then one day Jesus says something. Today's not important what he says. It's a really hard thing, though. Really hard. And it's a thing that draws a line in the sand for many people to choose to want to stop following Jesus. I had my own moment with that. It wasn't a hard teaching, it was a really hard experience. I'm going to share that in just a minute. But in John 6, 66, 67, we read, "At this point, many of his disciples turned away and deserted him. And then Jesus turned to the 12 and asked, 'Are you also going to leave?'" Not just the crowds leaving, you pick that up? Not just the crowds, committed disciples, committed to some extent. Something got hard. They left. It kind of goes from the curious, thronging crowds to just 12 who now know who he is, just 12. So I need to tell you my story now. I want to tell you my story now, I don't need to. How is this relevant, and particularly this passage about Jesus calming the storm? So I mentioned to you, I think I said before, I've been here for 37 years. About, what would it be? About 15 years or so, or go. No, I'll go back. So in my mid-30s, I'm newly married to Nikki. We have our first child on the way, Jake. I'm an elder here at the church. I've kind of said, yep, Jesus, I'm committed. I'm on the boat. Let's go. If I go back even earlier in my story, age 15, 17, I can tell you I had 2 miracles happen to me. I call them little miracles. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Little miracles, but things that I can just go, that was Jesus and nothing else. That had happened to me. They were moments of amazing spiritual growth and energy. Today, they are still watershed moments that I go back to draw on. After the miracle. I'm 35. I'm an elder in the church. We used to meet at a gentleman by the name of Brian Collins. Some of you know who he was. He had a business in the city. We used to meet there for prayer as elders. I left that meeting. I went to work. I sat down at my desk. And I just started to feel a little bit dizzy. So I just sat back in the chair and I had to keep my head a bit still. It felt uneasy to move. Dizziness does that to you. 15 minutes later, it was gone. 2 weeks later, the same things, prayer meeting, sitting at my desk. Later in the morning, the dizziness starts again. I start to sit. This time it doesn't stop. I'm taken to an ambulance, to hospital. I have all the checkups ensue from there, and I'm diagnosed with a condition called Meniere's disease. I have Meniere's disease. I'm in what I would call a type of remission. I get little signs here and then where it's a bit like those of you who suffer from migraines from time to time. I would sort of draw the analogy to that. That's where I am now. But this became very debilitating for me. It got to the point where I would have attacks. They come in clusters, these attacks. And for anyone who's had not dizziness, but vertigo, by vertigo I mean the room spinning violently and not stopping for 6 to 8 hours. I would get that anywhere from every 6 months, like 6 months break in between, but sometimes 3 months, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 1 month. At its worst, it was happening every second day. Thankfully, I was largely able to work and earn a living. At its worst, though, I ended up in hospital for 4 days. I ended up having to use up all my sick leave, all my annual leave, and it was actually at the point where we're starting about to draw on our savings because work wasn't going to pay for me to not be at work anymore. Thankfully, I was able to return to work, but I fell into quite a depression as well. But before it even got to that, before it got to that point, I called the elders. Elders, come and pray for me. I need God's healing. God, I believe you can heal me. Called the elders. They came to our house. They laid hands on me. They anointed me with oil. And they started praying. And at some time during the prayer, I don't know how many minutes in, I actually felt this other hand come on my shoulder. And I said, oh, God, is that you? I'm wishing, I'm hoping that's God. At the end of the prayer, I opened my eyes. It was just Gary, who was late. Okay? God is still healer though, right? Okay? He can heal. I'm trusting for healing. Very next day, major attack. Elders go away. Joe Gray, who was here last week, he was an elder at the time, and he and another elder went to prayer for me. After that, they rang me, said, Andrew, we've been praying. We want to know, we were trying to discern, is this some sort of spiritual demonic type attack, oppression? We want you to know we don't think it is. But I didn't get healed. I think what I might do now is just read something to you that I've written down. It was a month or so ago. I've gotten into journaling and doing a little bit of blogging. I titled this, What Are You Doing, God? It had been building for some time, and one night the final piece fell. And I pointed my finger straight at God and screamed, What are you doing, God? And in the next moment, I asked myself whether that was it. Have I come to the end of my faith journey with a God that, based on experience, made me wonder if he is really faithful or good in the details of life at all? At best, I thought, he is the supreme cosmic clockmaker, in charge of all time, history, present and future, but in execution, disinterested. Big enough to create each piece of the clock, to bring it to life, with detail enough to set it to measure out time with extraordinary precision and accuracy, and then wound up the giant springs that set all of life into motion, and having done his creative work, he let go. The clock is now ticking. The little hand with each revolution is taking us somewhere, maybe even somewhere good, but in the inevitable movement of the big hand, and with every tick of the clock that is needed to get us there, we are simply swept to our fate. I am introverted, reflective, and a deep thinker. Maybe I shouldn't say this bit. Okay, I will. When I get hurt or angry, I go silent. Bottle it in. I get and give payback by giving the silent treatment. Sorry, Nikki. I can go for days, longer actually. In truth, even when I'm at my best, my words are few, and I don't raise my voice much outside the 60 or so decibel level of normal speech. But that night, when I saw the 6 o'clock news and the story of a young innocent child recklessly and needlessly killed by a drunk driver, and then overlaid with my own 20 years of chronic illness, 5 years of deep depression, and a more predictable midlife, is this all there is question, and the outworking of a faith system seemingly without all the practical answers, I don't think the question is unreasonable. What are you doing, God? The question now was, what am I going to do? And in the next 30 seconds, here was my scattered thinking. I thought about my kids, aged 15, 13, 11 at the time. I couldn't be honest with them and potentially be the catalyst to destroy their faith. I'll just keep up appearances. Take a seat in the pew, play along. I'll read, and then this thought, this is all true, but I had this thought, I'll read my Bible. I'm going to read my Bible from beginning to end, perhaps for the last time. I'm going to read it from page 1. Then the thought came, I know I'll find things I won't like: global floods, patriarchy, God-sanctioned wars, violence, morally flawed God followers, and a list of failed leaders, and these might help validate my anger at God. I felt at peace with this thought. I was angry, confused, and in a dark place. I don't know if it was the next day or the day after, I did what I said. I'm going to start reading my Bible. I got to page 3, And the Spirit of God spoke to me through Scripture and made plain to me that all the mess in life that's spun into motion, it's not me. I have a beautiful and glorious hope for you in the future. I dived into Scripture. I read books. I spoke to people. And that has now been my last 8-year journey. To restate what I've just said in the context of that Mark 4 passage, Jesus calming the storm, this is how I'd put it. Jesus, I'm committed to get in the boat. He said, let's go. We're going to the other side. I'm in. Furious storm comes. I'm madly bailing out water. But I'm also looking out at other boats as well. I'm not desperately selfish. I'm looking at other boats. There's other people bailing out water. Some of them don't know Jesus as well as me. I turn around and Jesus is asleep. I scream, Jesus, what are you doing? He's awake now, and he doesn't calm the storm. Did you hear that? That was my experience. What he has taught me, and even if you look at that passage, the fact that Jesus gets angry at his disciples, "Oh, you of little faith," maybe that's a clue that the story was meant to be different. Maybe the storm, maybe he wanted to build into them such a faith that he didn't need to do the miracle. It feels like that. Jesus said, get in the boat, and Jesus said, we're going to the other side. I can trust Jesus now. We're going to the other side. You see what I'm saying? And I have gained a great confidence in knowing where Jesus is taking me. Huge confidence. This is why the story of God is just so important. Apostle Paul has a story as well, and this is very helpful to me. A bit of Paul's background. He survived shipwrecks, poisonous snake bite, imprisonment, hunger, beatings. He says also he's known what it is to really have a lot of food on his table and have great joy out of life. Surely the Apostle Paul has the faith to not doubt and to believe and receive whatever he asks for in Jesus' name. Yeah? 2 Corinthians 12, 8, 9. This is what happened to Paul. He gets a thorn in his flesh, some sort of physical ailment. He says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. So when this hard thing happened, and crowds went away, and some of his closest disciples went away, they went back to their homes, their jobs. They went back to rule by King Herod, Caesar Augustus. They went back to enjoy the beautiful Roman roads and the beautiful Roman baths that they invented. In other words, their life wasn't necessarily all that bad, but they're still under the power of another authority that has it over them. They are not free. John 6, 66, 68 again. This is the response of Simon Peter when Jesus says to him, to the 12, are you going to leave as well? And Simon's response is, Lord, to whom will we go? Not where will we go? To whom will we go? Only you have the words of it that give eternal life. We believe and we know you are the Holy One of God. Again, another great place to stop the story, right? Beautiful ending. Many of you know, of course, what happens to Peter after this. He gets in, another really tough situation, I want to give Peter a bit of a defense for Peter here. Jesus is arrested by Rome. He's in prison. And I get the fact he doesn't want to be acquainted with him. He had fear that if they know I'm a follower of his, am I in prison? Am I next? Am I going to be crucified? So I want to cut him. But still, he denied he knew Jesus 3 times. This is going to be our story throughout. We are not perfect people. What God has been saying to me and through my life story, and even in these passages, God demonstrates his power with miracles. God also demonstrates his power in weakness. I can't answer the question for you why. I can't settle the confusion for you on that point. But we have a singular purpose as Christians. I've said it in the language of to reclaim the nations. Now, come with me now, back to that same mountain that Satan took Jesus and said, look, I'll give you these in an instant. And let's just have a look at them now. If we go up there now, what we actually see is this power and authority of God has spread all throughout our world. God's plan of doing that requires people who have got a tough faith. Last night I looked up a website, because I'm not only a money man, Elliot, I'm a stats man. And I wanted to get a sense of where has Christianity spread. And okay, to be fair, they lump Christians into the broad basket of Christians, Catholic, everything. I was blown away by where it spread to. And then I sort of put it in a different order, and here's places where less than 1% are Christian. Morocco, Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Algeria, Tunisia, Western Sahara, Yemen, Bangladesh, Cambodia. There's still a lot of work to be done. And through my experience, God has been shaping my faith to be a more robust and hard faith, one that is able to endure. I think the only thing that I want to mention around as a possible way to answer this question of why don't we see more miracles, why doesn't God just act now versus this other thing, and one of the why does it have to be so hard and we don't see miracles? One of the ways I see it is that God in his wonderful mercy and grace on page 1 of the Bible set this all up for us to be free will images of himself. So back to the drunk driver that I was raging at for drinking and swerving off the road and killing an innocent child. That image bearer of God made a stupid decision. Free will decision. Wasn't God. And the other thing that we did at the start of this is we set it in a scene in which Satan rules. There's a fight still going on. We're in the now but not yet phase. And this is a hugely big task we are called to, important task. So as we close, and the band can come back up now if you'd like. This is a tough one to know because sometimes, actually I was at a meeting last week actually, and there was just professional development, and they were talking about procrastinators. Any procrastinators in the house? I am better than you, let me tell you. Okay, here's the things what happens with procrastinators, okay? We sit there and we there's a task we have to do, but it's too big, okay? That's one of the things, it's too big. So too big, and it becomes hard. I won't worry. The deadline's not till then, I won't worry. So I realised I've pushed this challenge out there to a hard faith, but know there's a glorious future. Please. Know that we get to walk it with Jesus all the way. Know that he will sufficiently provide his grace for you when you need it. Know that you will fail. Know that if you turn back to him, he will pick you up and love you. So, big task. Here's what I've been doing in the last 12 months or so. I've been trying to break it down. I've tried to always in my mind, just to be practical here, I've always tried to say, okay, I need to be doing something. And I've always had this thing of, okay, what can I do next? Part of it I describe as it being the testing of my faith. Okay? I've been trying to just keep testing my faith and just do this thing. I've done that thing. I'm now going to do that thing. So can I ask, if you want to apply this at all, think about challenging yourself. Just do a little bit of a faith test. It could be really small. Really small. I think I'm going to have to let you to work out what that is. Maybe some of us need to make room to be able to do that thing. Maybe the first step is cut back on that thing that I really enjoy, but you know what, I'm just going to, for a week, 2 weeks, a month, I'm going to not do that and I'm going to do this. And just see what God does. I describe these little moments of doing these things, and then another time I realized this thing, and I realized this thing, that the sum of my moments is now becoming my momentum. Just test yourself and see what God might do. Yeah, I think we'll close in prayer. Hey, will you pray with me? God, I'm conscious this has been a hard message. Hard for all of us, perhaps, to hear. And maybe some are daunted, confused, afraid. Maybe some have their own questions. Maybe some are in a similar place. Maybe some are angry at you. Maybe some are just numb. Lord, would you just move us by your Spirit, speak to us each individually, and give us the courage to make a choice, to align our faith again with Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.